Hello everyone. I've been creating tutorial videos to show you how to compose symphonies. Since we're focusing on the Romantic period, I had an idea for a romantic symphony project that we could do together. There's a particular kind of movement that I always wanted to write, and it has to do with Schubert. Schubert's Eighth is one of the great symphonies, but he left it unfinished. He wrote the first two movements and a few measures of a third movement, and stopped, just never got back to it. The first two movements together make a brilliant concert piece, and it's one of the most beloved pieces out there. Many composers have tried to finish Schubert's Eighth. It's been a popular challenge for 200 years, and I always wanted to take a try at writing a third movement. So, here's my chance. I can do it for you as an exercise in early Romantic music. I can show you how to write a Scherzo movement, a third movement of a Romantic symphony. Here's the rules. I'll write a Schubertian third movement, the best I can. It'll be full of the dance rhythms and catchy lyrical melodies. It'll have those unexpected harmonic modulations that Schubert loved so much that wrench you into remote keys. It'll go on and on with that heavenly length. Robert Schumann is the guy who said that Schubert's music had a heavenly length, which I think is both a compliment and an insult. The instrumentation is exactly the same as the first movement of Schubert's Eighth, but we won't worry about the instrumentation yet, because as usual, we have to start with a sketch. When you compose a symphony movement, you should always sketch it first, to get the tunes and the transitions, the proportions. Composers used to work for months on a continuity sketch, to get it just right, to craft that thread of musical ideas running through the piece, before they ever got around to filling in the orchestration. When I write sketches, I pile the notes into the first violin part, and here and there I'll put in some harmony ideas. Later on, we can distribute those piles of notes to other instruments and orchestrate the piece properly. But for now, we're only concerned about the flow and the form. A scherzo movement is easy and lovely to compose. If you want to, you can do it yourself. You don't have to do it the Schubertian way or my way. You might have a different style, different tunes, a different musical mood. All you need is the underlying form, and you can decorate that form as you wish. A scherzo movement is usually the third movement of a symphony, but sometimes the second. It's light, lively, often with a twinkle of humor. It's organized a lot like a minuet and trio, and you can always go back and look at my video on how to compose a minuet and trio movement. But whereas the minuet is a stately kind of dance, very measured and controlled, the scherzo is faster and bubblier. It has more kinetic forward motion, and it's usually in triple time, 3/4 or 6/8. The overall structure is a sandwich. There's an A part, a B part, and a return to the A part. Each one of these parts has subdivisions. Let's start with the A part. First, we pick a key for the piece. I've picked D major because the first movement of the symphony is in B minor, and D is the relative major. It has the same key signature, and sonically, aesthetically, it feels related. It fits into the larger whole. So our A1 part will start in D major. It usually moves fairly directly, fairly quickly to the key of the fifth, in this case A major. It ends there, kind of hanging in the air. Part A1 is like a simple ramp. The A1 part then usually repeats. Then you have the A2 part, more complex, more of a journey, usually spun out longer than the A1 part, 2-3 times as long. It uses the same material as in A1, but in different combinations, fragmented in different ways, perhaps going through multiple keys, and eventually finds its way back to the original key, D major in this case. You often have a final restatement of the original theme. The A2 part also typically repeats. This organization seems a lot like the sonata form, which I've covered in previous videos. It has a kind of exposition that introduces a theme and modulates to another key. Then it has a development section, tossing around thematic fragments, winding its way back to the home key. Then it has a kind of recapitulation, restating the original theme, coming to a satisfying end. And the sonata form grew out of binary forms like this. So it's not a surprise that there's a deep kinship between this kind of A1, A2 structure and a full-fledged sonata movement. But for all that, the scherzo is still not really a sonata movement. A sonata form has multiple themes that contrast with each other, like some kind of epic struggle, maybe a triumphant theme and a soft, pretty theme, or a dark minor key theme and a winsome major key theme. The contrast gives the piece its depth. But here in a scherzo, you typically build the entire A section out of a single theme. It doesn't have a lot of internal contrast. It has one consistent bubbly mood and feel, one melody, starting out lively and dancing along from there. That lack of internal struggle between competing themes is part of what gives the movement its lightness. All of this is very abstract, and we need a concrete example. Let's get back to my sketch. The first task is to construct part A1, a tune that moves from D major to A major. I want to spin it out long enough to be substantial, not the very brief versions you might see in a Mozart-era symphony, but more like an early Romantic symphony. I've started it with a flowing, running figure. Let's just listen to that to begin with. My reason for putting this running figure here is to give a callback to the first movement of Schubert's Eighth, which begins with something very similar. Well, there's an introduction in the low strings, and then a running figure. It's a very Schubert thing to do. I think it reflects his experience writing songs for solo voice with running figures in the piano accompaniment. Anyway, starting with that flowing running figure, we let the tune emerge out of it. Something lyrical, yet dancey. The dotted rhythm helps it feel dancey, and if it doesn't make your feet want to move, then it doesn't quite sound like Schubert. The tune repeats here, and then I threw in a very Schubertian flourish. The music suddenly bops into a different key for 3 measures, the key of F major, which comes out of nowhere. It just parachutes in. D major and F major are not related. And then it's gone. It just bops away again, and we're back to D major. In fact, I may have gone overboard with the Schubertian flourish here. It's a bit too obvious, but what the heck, let's leave it in. Then the tune continues, singing, skipping along, eventually moving to an A major cadence, a kind of interim ending. Let's just listen to that whole A1 section, how it moves and how it can loop back on itself in the repeat. We don't have to listen to the whole repeat. And I won't claim it's the greatest music in the world, but it has some flow and lilt to it, some dancey dotted rhythms, some surprising harmonic moments, and it does sound Schubertian. Now that we have a sketch of part A1, let's look at part A2. Its job is to get from the key of A major back to the key of D major, in the same kinetic, lively way, using the same material, the same theme as in A1. Then it needs a nice convincing ending so that the whole A section feels like a complete unit. You see here a simple tune made out of motifs from the A1 section, and you see it repeat in various ways. There's nothing exciting about it. In fact, it feels like it's playing out a very ordinary kind of logic, but it's doing so intentionally to set you up for a surprise. Because suddenly when you're lulled into thinking that you understand the flow of the piece, pow! Another wrenching modulation comes out of nowhere, yanking you to E-flat minor, which is about as distant as you can get. This is an attempt at the Schubert spirit. Let's listen to the tune so far. Now we're in E-flat minor, and the piece does something that's atypical of a scherzo. But to be a romantic composer, you have to throw in some atypicality somewhere to prove that you're creative. The most standard romantic piece in the world has to have something startlingly non-standard stuck into it, or it wouldn't follow the standard practice of throwing in a bit of non-standard creativity, if that makes any sense. The non-standard element here is that the music has real internal contrast. A minor key melody pops in, seemingly unrelated to anything else. Where did it come from? What's it doing here? Why did we go to the most distant minor key and stick in a new melody in the middle of an innocent scherzo? What did the poor scherzo ever do to us to deserve that? But not to worry, it's only a temporary surprise. As it moves along, we find out that it's not really new material. The new melody repeats and morphs until you begin to recognize familiar motifs from part A1, and we soon get back to a comfortable key and to familiar sounds. Let's listen to that passage from the unexpected E-flat minor melody to the familiar motifs in A major. Now we still have the job of getting back home from A major to D major, so let's just do that in a straightforward way. We'll use the magic of sequences. A sequence is a fragment of music that's repeated several times in different keys, in different harmonies, morphing a little bit each time to give a sense of stepping in a goal-directed manner from one place to another. We'll step our way back to D major and to the familiar old theme from part A1. Starting with the end of the last segment, it sounds like this. Now I'll do something that's probably not advisable in most scherzo movements, but I'm trying to capture that Schubertian heavenly length. I'll repeat the whole tune from the A1 section with a modified ending so that it can close nice and strong on the key of D major. Let's listen to that A section, both A1 and A2, without the repeats, of course, because we don't want to be here all day. A movement lives off of contrast. It needs contrast. You can't have a 12 or 15-minute movement droning on with the same melody and mood. That's why the scherzo movement always has a middle section, the trio section. The trio section has the same organization exactly. It's a two-part form, B1 and B2, and the two parts work the same way with respect to each other. But the mood is different, the tone is different. The trio section evolved from a literal trio, two upper instruments playing interlocking melodies, and a bass instrument plugging away at the harmony notes. A trio has a kind of light chamber music feel. When symphonies expanded, trio sections were no longer literal trios. They're still called trios, but they have oodles of instruments and complexity, and yet they still retain the feel. They're lighter, gentler, and especially they feel more relaxed than the driving energy of the Scherzo A section. We're not talking about a slow movement here. It's not that different. It has to feel like it fits into the same movement, but the audience should feel like they can lean back in their seats and relax for a moment. In that spirit, I've slowed the tempo for it a little, just a shade, and I've tried to come up with some lyrical tunes that flow along and never entirely lose the energy of the movement. Also, in the trio spirit, I've sketched out a part of a fun bass line. It cuts off after 8 measures, and that's okay. We'll figure out how to continue it later. All I want here is to sketch the idea so I know how to build it out later. And in the Schubert spirit, I've put it in a very remote key, B flat major. Normally the trio section would be in the same key, or at least a very closely related key, as the A section, but, Schubert. Let's listen to the entire B section, keeping in mind that the same organization applies as for the A section. And at the end, I put in some harmonies to wrench you back from B flat major to D major. The final part of the movement is a return to the A section, just a straight repeat of what I showed you before. So we've now constructed everything, and the movement is done. And I mean really done. We may have only a sketch, and it may look like barely a symphony movement. But all the hard work is done. Orchestrating is the easy part. Give this sketch to 10 composers to complete, and you'll get 10 essentially similar movements, which means that the music is very constrained now. The essential choices have all been made. And I really wanted you to see what a raw sketch looks like, because I think once you see that, you realize it's not that hard to understand, and it's not that hard to do yourself. In case you're interested to hear the entire sketch, here it is, with explanatory notes along the way.
you.